And for more on the fallout from the Hunter Biden felony tax evasion charges, let's bring in a former U.S. attorney. He is also the former New Jersey governor and Republican presidential candidate Chris Christie, and joins us live from New Hampshire. It's good to see you. Thank you very much, Governor, for being with us today from New Hampshire.
My pleasure, Andrea. Thanks for having me.
And as you may remember, you and I were together doing the program that day 5 or so months ago, back in June, when the plea deal fell apart on what would have been a misdemeanor tax charge. Now Hunter Biden's lawyers are facing a second indictment with, 3 felonies, 9 counts, and a far more serious potential penalty. So is this one of the worst plea agreement defense, how the defense handled that in recent history?
Oh, look, well, we talked about it that day. You remember, yeah. I had been saying for weeks before that the judge would never, approve such a sweetheart plea deal. And I think what his lawyers did was give him awful advice. And I think what the prosecutors did was awful as well in terms of agreeing to a deal like that was so manifestly unjust. And so now he's facing what he should have been facing from the beginning, which were felony tax charges. When you involve millions of dollars in tax evasion, that is a felony. And the same thing with the felony gun charges. And he faces these charges because the government has evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed these crimes. And so he's now going to have to decide how the best way is to resolve these matters. I'm sure that he could negotiate a plea at this point, but it's not going to be the kind of sweetheart deal he got before. And my guess is that with the combination of the gun charges and the tax charges, that Hunter Biden is going to have to do time in jail.
Which is really remarkable. Do you think that this could start during the campaign season, or would it be after the election, given all the pretrial discovery and everything else that has to happen?
My guess is that the gun charges could potentially happen prior to the election. But on the tax charges that have just been brought, my guess is that there won't be enough time for that to start before the election. So I think he might have to make some decisions on the gun charges that are filed in the state of Delaware. But he will probably not have to make decisions unless he wants to regarding the tax charges, because my guess is that won't go to trial till either near the end of 2024 or more likely in the beginning of 2025.
Is there any exposure? There's nothing mentioned about President Joe Biden in this, and no connection. But is there a problem, potential problem, in that a prominent Democratic donor whom Hunter Biden did not know came to his rescue and paid the back taxes for him in terms of millions of dollars?
Well, look, it depends on what the president knew and whether he played any role in inducing that donor to help Hunter Biden. And we won't know the answer to those questions for some time until discovery is done in this case. But it's something I'm sure the president knows the answer to that. And if he was involved in it, then he's going to have a problem. And we also don't know, with the income that Hunter was making, was there any indication that the president shared in any of that income at all? And if so, then he might have some tax issues to deal with as well. So those are things still yet to be discovered. And I'm sure that, as I read this morning, the prosecutors in California said the investigation is ongoing. And so we'll see. And I'm sure there's going to be congressional oversight, which will touch on this as well. But the president's conduct will be what judges his own culpability up or down, not what his son does. We're not held to account for what our children do in the same way children are not held to account for what their parents do from a legal perspective. But the president's going to have to answer if he had any kind of involvement in any of this activity with Hunter.
So is it unfair for the House to be, according to the Speaker, going ahead with a vote to open an impeachment inquiry? That's the test for that is high crimes and misdemeanors.
Well, look, I don't know. I think it would be unfair to vote articles of impeachment because there's no evidence there. But I think the House has an appropriate oversight function. Now, Andrea, whether that's done with the House Oversight Committee or whether it's done through an impeachment inquiry, I think what matters the most is that people get all the information they need about the president's conduct for Congress to have appropriate oversight and for the public to make a judgment, since Joe Biden has declared himself a candidate for re-election for 2024. So that information should be public. It should be transparent. The White House should fully cooperate with both the investigations being done by the Justice Department and any oversight that happens from the House, because if the president has nothing to hide, he shouldn't be hiding anything.
Now, there's a new Wall Street Journal poll turning to the campaign, which has Donald Trump within 40 points ahead of both Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, who are essentially tied. You're in 5th place. So is New Hampshire, place or win there or bust?
Well, I don't know if it's win there or bust, but Andrew, look, these national polls are ridiculous. You've been covering politics long enough to know that national polls mean nothing because we don't have a national primary. Donald Trump has nowhere near that kind of lead in either Iowa or New Hampshire. And I'm in double digits in New Hampshire, where I've been spending the overwhelming majority of my time. And I'm either in 3rd place or tied for 2nd, depending upon the poll that you look at. So no one's voted yet. I know will be an unfulfilled dream of my lifetime that they would stop doing these national polls because they're meaningless, and an unfulfilled dream of my lifetime that you all would stop spending so much time talking about them. Remember, at this stage of the race 8 years ago, Ben Carson was 10 points ahead in the Iowa caucuses, and Ted Cruz was at 7%. Ted Cruz wound up getting nearly 27%. 6 weeks later and winning the Iowa caucuses, and Ben Carson came in 5th. So polls today, even in the early states, while they're more instructive, they're nowhere near determinative. So I'm just going to continue to do what I'm doing. I'm in the midst of a college campus tour up here. I've been to 4 colleges here in New Hampshire in the last day and a half. I'm about to do some more later this afternoon. And I'm going out and reaching out to brand new voters potentially for the Republican Party. And, these folks have come here and they're listening and they're going to participate. And they're going to be the ones that are going to determine this. I wanted to remind you of one last thing, Andrea. As much as 45% of the vote in the Republican primary in New Hampshire could be from independent voters.
Right. I was going to say that.
So, yeah. So, it's going to be a big deal. All those independents and anybody else who wants to support us, go to chrischristie.com and support us. We're not going anywhere, Andrea. I will be on the ballot in New Hampshire campaigning right up till January 23rd, and I intend to do very well here.